SQology Podcast. Interview with Erin Hardison, a.k.a. Bikini Punk. In studio today with me is Clifton Keplinger, who just got back from about 8 days of traveling to and from Aggieland. Cliff, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Aggieland is and what you were doing there?
Sure. Erin keeps making funny faces at me.
You can see them. Okay.
Aggieland is a 2-day event in College Station, Texas. It's put on by Chris Pate at Mobile Toys. This is the 5th year of Aggieland. It kind of developed from T-Town in Tulsa at Car Toys. As of now, it's sound quality only, Iasca and Mecha. It also includes 2 days of a money round event with $5,000 in cash prizes. That is over 33 competitors maximum. And then this year we had 6 sound quality judges for the money round event. So basically they go through all 6 judges over 2 days, go through each of the 33 cars, and then their scores are tallied. And then obviously the person with the best score wins and goes down from there. And then the top 10 competitors all win a portion of the cash prizes. This year, Steve Head entered both his Blazer and his Aspen in the money round event and got number 1 and number 2 in that. It was a pretty fun event. Lots of cars. I judged a lot of cars twice because of Mecha and money round, but I think I had 62 score sheets that I filled out altogether.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's 62 times you have to sit in a 100-degree plus car and be still, quiet, listen. That's a lot of judging.
Has 43 on Saturday and then rest on Sunday. So Sunday was kind of a light day, which would still be a full day at most any other event. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think we still had 11 or 12 judges altogether there. And of course, lots of competitors and 2 days of frivolity and fun. So yeah,
nice.
If anybody can make it down, it's a great event.
And all of those competitors, because we kind of attached SQology to it, were entered into the SQology points race. So I'm assuming we'll have an update to that coming sometime soon also.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that'll awesome. Be going out later this week to all the competitors, as well as updates on what's coming up with the event in July 29 and 30 in Cumming, Georgia. We're going to have a 5X sound quality weekend as well as a 3X SPL weekend. And we now have 16 judges lined up for that. There's going to be a 2X Mecha and Iasca on Saturday at Audition Audio, and then a 3X Mecha and Iasca sound quality at Hybrid Audio headquarters on Sunday.
That's a great way for people to get those finals points.
That and tons of feedback. I mean...
Right? 16 judges. My God. Yeah.
And from a lot of varying backgrounds and varying places, we got 2 or 3 judges coming from the West Coast. Chris Pate is going to come out from Texas, and we have Tim Gowdy and John Skeeto and Joe Wallace and a few others coming from Texas area, and a couple Mecha judges that pretty much only judge Mecha coming out as well. So it should be pretty diverse, and we usually try to pair up 2 judges together that may have diverse backgrounds as well. And so it kind of gets different judging philosophies kind of meshed together, on top of having lots of different types of cars there to judge. It's as much of an event for the judges as it is for the competitors. The competitor, it's kind of a flip-flop from most shows, but I'm sure it'll be tons of fun. And yeah, it's nice too because we have the time then to give the feedback, because we're not just rushing through judging. Each judge is having to do fewer cars and focused on one thing a little bit more. So last year when we did this event, and there was a couple cars that after we were done judging, the judges just kind of went over and started help training them how to tune right there on the spot, which was a blast. It'll be fun. And then in August, of course, we have the comeback of the Steel Valley Show, formerly SVR or Steel Valley Regionals in West Virginia. That's going to be a huge event as well. It'll also be a money round event like Aggieland. We're going to do something sort of like that at the show next month. It won't be necessarily a money round event. It's going to be a charity event for Parkinson's research. So we're pretty much giving away everything that comes in. We are going to take those who do Iasca and Mecha 2X and 3X on both days. We're going to average the score sheets similar to the way they did at Aggieland. And we have several very well qualified people that are going to help handle that over the weekend. And then those will be put into an overall kind of one lump class for an overall winner of the event. and we're kind of going to do the same for SPL as well.
Awesome.
These 3 events are definitely, other than finals, in my opinion, the biggest and most diverse of the year. So it should be lots of fun.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, we've got Erin on the phone with us today. Erin, hello. Are you there?
Yeah, Bikini Punk.
Bikini Punk, yeah.
The artist
so do you want to give us do you want to give us a little bit of a background on yourself? Where you come from, what you're doing, where you've been in the hobby, and what else you've got going on with everything audio?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to kick it off, I started this sound quality hobby, well, even before then. So I got into car audio, I think, in about 2003. And that was because my mom had bought me a set of Rockford subs and a Rockford amp off of Crutchfield because I sent her the link and said, this is what I would like for Christmas. So she did that. And
nice.
I think about 2000. So I started going on the forums a couple of years after that. Went on to, I think it was Sound Domain first, thecaraudio.com. And then I joined DEMA, DIY Mobile Audio. I think it was like 2007 or so. And then from there, man, I've just been in the hobby. So I blame Kirk Profit, shout out Kirk, for getting me into the hobby. He invited me to a get-together he had, I think it was probably about 2008. And he lives just about 30 minutes from me. So I drove up there, took a friend with me. He was serving big fat steaks. Ate a big fat steak, thanked him for the food, and left. Not really. So he had a bunch of people up there. I remember Matt Roberts was there. Scott Selvage was there. Jeff Smith was there. I know I'm probably leaving out a few people, but some big hitters in the orgs at the time. So they all chit-chatted with me and made me feel comfortable. And then I got a demo from Kirk and his TL. And I remember he played Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. And, man, I've been hooked ever since. That was pretty much it. That was in-game for me. I've been in it ever since then. The technical side of the house, the speaker measurements and things like that are all more just because I remember you guys had Matt Hall on here, and I remember him saying something along the lines of how he's kind of a critical or an analytical person by nature. And I think I'm that way just maybe from my background. And so I got into the speaker measurements and things like that, running my website, doing stuff for the site and things like that. And anyway, long story short, I've been in this hobby for a while now, and I really enjoy it. And I'm happy to be here as part of the podcast, maybe doing a little bit of review and chit-chat with you guys. So,
what is your website?
Yeah, sometimes I get lost in the shuffle of talking to myself. So my website is medleysmusings.com, and the name was based off of my middle name. Yes, it is Medley. No, my parents don't like me because, yes, I do have Erin is spelled like a girl, and I have Medley smack dab right next to it. It's hyphenated.
Wow.
So I never got beat up, but, I had to defend myself verbally a lot of times in third grade. It was tough, man.
In addition to that website, you also have a YouTube channel, I think, right?
I do. I have my personal YouTube channel that I post various videos to. I just posted a what I call a virtual build log onto that. I thought that would be a good way to cap off the build log that I've had on the forums, because typically you see all these pictures and you have a lot of words around them. And I feel a lot of the times when I try to, do due diligence and explain why I chose the speaker I chose or why I chose the installation method I chose and things like that, I feel like sometimes it's glossed over just by the pictures. And I feel that way because I do the same thing in other people's build logs as well. And then months later, I'll go back when I had the time and actually try to read through, ask them why they did things they did. But I thought the video build log would be a good way for me to actually walk through the car, show, this is what it looks like now, and explain why I did what I did, and provide, a 14, 15-minute little demo, or not demo, but explanation and walkthrough on that. So, and I would like to keep doing that, with other people. I think that would be kind of cool to see. So.
Ben just likes to do his demos on YouTube, period. I mean, that's how he rolls.
We have a Facebook group for that.
I heard.
Car Audio by YouTube. That. Oh, yeah.
I can't do it, man. Oh, what are you guys doing, man? You're killing me.
We asked you to be on the show today, primarily to talk about a product that we all kind of have our eyes on. Klif, do you want to kind of lead us into that?
This kind of, for me, turned into an emergency podcast to do because of those 62 score sheets I filled out this weekend. 25 of those were filled out with Sony GS9 in the head unit specification. I thought that was a pretty big percentage for a $1,500 head unit. I've definitely got more accustomed to it, especially after this past weekend. I think I'm pretty much a pro at it now. One of the things I have noticed is that there's varying firmwares which have some varying different ways to do things. Also, for overall, the top 2 cars at least were using head units from like 2001. And CD changers. Both of them have CD changers as their primary source. It's Steve Heads. So, the cars also have Tweed. What do you expect? I think the GS9 is probably one of the biggest pushes that I would say any of the big companies have made toward a sound quality based product for quite a while. As we've discussed in previous podcasts, there's a lot of some agreement, some disagreement on how much HiRes itself actually makes. But at the same time, I definitely don't want to discourage Sony from continuing down this path, because hopefully it'll encourage forward motion in that. And
just imagine the people listening to this on some nice systems. That dog sounded real, man. I know, right? They have Sonys.
Hopefully, about 3 steps in on hopefully getting one of the engineers from Sony on the podcast as well, to be able to get the flip side from their perspective of why they did what they did, decisions they made, where they're going from here. So
that's pretty cool.
I'm hoping to kind of use this as a basis to get some input from someone like Erin, who's has a lot of that critical thinking background by nature, which I kind of don't. And our input from just using it as far as Ben's and mine, and I'm sure several listeners will have their ideas as well. So this is kind of an information gleaning episode for this product, so we can kind of see where we all think of it, where we're going with it, and then, what Sony's idea of what the product is.
And I think maybe it's important to note that, the 3 of us have kind of joked around and talked about the head unit, but it's very minimal. So we haven't really discussed the things that we plan to talk about here. I don't believe, right?
Correct.
So none of this has been rehearsed, just for anybody who may be curious. This is really all just kind of off the top. I printed off some notes from myself from my build log when I was doing some testing on it, just to kind of have as go-bys. But like I said, this is all just kind of off the top. So I don't know where you guys want to start at. Do you guys want to start at maybe more of the testing results that I had gotten, just the basic stuff, and then kind of go into our user interface concerns?
Yeah. I would say kind of go through just kind of how you approach the product, from opening the box to usage to results from that. Just kind of walk us through your story with it.
I had the Pioneer P99. I think it was like my 5th one since they've come out. I've had so many now. It's crazy, because I love them, but then I want to try the next new thing, or I get tired of stuff. I mean, it's kind of like all of us in this hobby, I think. There are very few of us who can build a car and be done with it forever. So having said that, when the Sony came out, it didn't really interest me that much. I didn't really like the aesthetic of it. And for me, and I know it may be crazy, but when I look at a head unit, I want it to, I don't know, I don't want to say speak to me, but I want it to look nice. How's that? There's not a lot of aftermarket head units that look nice. There's none that I can think of that really look OEM. So when it comes to head units, for me, I'm very picky about what I buy, and that has a lot to do with why I go through so many, just because I'm trying to find one that, A, I like the look of, B, I like the interface of, and C, obviously the sound quality. The C portion, to me, isn't so much of a determining factor, I feel like. And I'm not going to say that all amplifiers sound the same, all head units sound the same. I don't do that. But I will say that I feel like if it's from a reputable company, then they're likely making a good product, and I don't have to worry that it's going to crap out on me or it's going to sound terrible or anything like that.
Right.
But having said that, I had some friends who said, "Oh man, you need to try the Sony. So I borrowed one from a friend of mine, and I set up on my workbench, measured the voltage out, and then did the same thing to the P99 so I could A/B them. Now, this was not blind, obviously. But for me, whatever, I didn't really care about that. I really just wanted to kind of see if there were any differences that I noticed with my eyes on the head unit, and did anything jump out at me. So tonality-wise, I didn't really hear a big difference. And I've talked to other people who said that, yeah, they did, but I personally didn't. The thing that stood out to me about the Sony was the soundstage. I felt like it conveyed a larger soundstage. There was more separation between instruments or things going on within the stage. There was, I guess the imaging was tighter and focused. So that's a big selling point to me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was actually just having a conversation with someone today. I'm just going to read you our last two messages here. One is just a thumbs up from me. He says, I added the Sony to my ride last weekend. Made a huge difference. I was shocked at how much more open my car got.
Huh.
Anecdotal evidence there, but yeah.
Yeah, and I've had a couple other guys, I won't mention names. I don't know if they want me to say their names, but a couple other friends who compete and do pretty well in the circuits when they do compete. They said the same thing when I told them, like, yeah, man, I noticed the same thing. So, you take that for what it is, like you said, anecdotal evidence or confirmation bias, if you will.
Sure.
But, yeah, so I'm really happy with how it sounds. Now, then there's the aspect of how does the GUI work and how does it look and stuff like that. So, aesthetic speaking, it could be better. It's not terrible. It reminds me a lot of the Denons, and I think I've said this to some people before, but like the older Denons where they had the single knob on it and they had little buttons on it. This Sony reminds me a lot of that. So I don't know if that's what they were going for or not. I mean, I wouldn't think they would just copy it, so I'm not trying to imply that. But it definitely gives me that feel.
With the big knob in the center that it's taken. I do agree. There's some similar features there, but I don't think it's a direct copy.
Yeah,
but I'm with you on that aesthetic thing. I personally, when they came out, I didn't want one. It just didn't catch my eye. It didn't appeal to me. But anyway, moving forward, I do own one now. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and when I tested it on my workbench, I just had a power supply set up, and I was like, man, I can't get over this. I mean, it's coming from something where I was plugging an iPod into it. I never did USB drives before. I always took my iPod. I modify the iPod's internal storage. I have one that holds like 512 gigabytes, and people modify them for 1 terabyte. It's crazy. But I did all that before, never really used USB, so this is kind of new to me coming into it. And the biggest gripe I had about the Sony was just the GUI, just the graphic user interface, or the lack thereof, I suppose I should say. You mean on the device itself? Yeah,
on the Sony itself, correct. Yeah. Sure. But when I realized, that you're supposed to use the app, that's how it was designed, then I was like, okay, well, I can't give them too much junk for that. So when you use it in that manner, it makes things easier. But with a regular iPhone size, it's still kind of clunky to control it. It's something like an iPad or maybe a tablet, it's a little bit larger like an iPad. I think people have better success or they have less complaints about it when they go that route.
And we're talking about the Sony SongPal app, which they've changed, and they're now simply calling it Music Center, I believe is the new app name. So yeah, and it's one thing too. I've never used the Onkyo app, but I know a lot of people have. Maybe you guys have.
That's all I use.
Okay, so the Onkyo app, I think you guys are probably using it because you can control your like FLAC music and stuff like that from it. Is that correct? Or
well, from a iOS device, it's the only way you can get high-res files over.
Right.
And it's just simple. I have not used the Music Center app yet since they kind of merged all that together. The SongPal app, like whenever competitors are only using the SongPal app and I have to use that while judging, it seems like I end up crashing it every time I use it somehow, or end up in the wrong directory by pushing one button wrong way one time. Instinctively, I've just kind of stayed away from it. And so there's no fast forward or rewind function.
True. There is not, yeah. Well, and so what is the new app is, what did you guys say it was? Because I can't remember. I don't want to click on my phone and make all sorts of noise, but it's the music library, is that right?
Music Center. It's like a yellow icon with a white note, almost like a sun exuding from the note. And then there's also this advanced car audio app, so I originally had SongPal on my phone, and then I updated them, and then I ended up somehow with 2 different apps. So I've got this Music Center app, which I think is the one I'm supposed to be using, but then also this other one, advanced something or rather. It's ... I can't read the full name of it. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, the Onkyo player works great.
So I hear it does. Well, the reason I brought that up is because just today I was just playing around with the app to kind of refresh myself, because I really haven't, and we'll maybe get into that, but I haven't used it much myself either. But I did notice on the help menus that they do allow now the ability to control or I guess use FLAC files through that app on an iOS device. So I'm assuming it's the same way that you loaded FLAC files into your Onkyo app. You just do the same thing now with a new update to the Sony app. So
or any other high-res format, DSD or...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of cool. But kind of get back to the Sony app. I've gotten used. It's kind of funny. I bought this thing being the Sony. I bought it because I was thinking, I'm going to hook up a USB drive to it, and I'm going to put all these files on it and all that stuff. And man, for the past 2 months, I've been using my phone connected straight to it. So I've been listening to music that I have in my library, which is not FLAC or anything like that. I mean, it's just off my iTunes, and it's higher res stuff. Well, I shouldn't say higher res. It's good quality CDs and stuff like that. And then I also use the Apple Music app, which I think you, Ben, said that you use as well for streaming music.
Yeah, I subscribe to Apple Music, and I've been really happy with it just because it unlocks virtually the entire iTunes library you have at your fingertips.
So anyway, just all that to say is, I did all these things. I was going to do all this, USB drives, and now I'm just plugging my phone into it every day. It's kind of funny.
Convenience.
Yeah, I mean, it works. And then,
I'm the same way. I mean, even like a year and a half ago, I was still saying I'm never going to use my phone as my source, and but here I am.
Yep.
Even in my truck, it's not a high-res player or anything, but it's got a DVD player built into it, and it's got a USB connection, and I just plug it into my phone and use my phone.
Yeah.
It's okay. I only use Bluetooth, so I'm actually a step behind.
Well, you're driving, so sound quality doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
How much have you played with the different file formats through it to kind of see if there's how much difference you're picking up between real high res file versus one that's 44:116 CD quality?
Right. So I can't really give a very objective answer. I mean, obviously you're asking me a subjective question, but I can't. It's hard to say because a lot of the high res music that I have, it's not. So what I'm trying to look for here. I don't know if it came from the same source is what I'm trying to say. So I've got, that's the thing.
Everybody keeps saying the same thing.
I've got an album from the Cars that I listen to a lot. And then Steve Cook let me borrow his thumb drive and put some music on it. And he had the whole Cars like anthology or whatever the proper term is, basically every CD that they ever had. And it was all in high res. And I remember the first track that came up, I can't remember the title of the song now, but I remember when it came up, I was like, whoa, I've never heard it like that before. But then I thought, okay, is it because of the high res or is it because, it maybe was a different master, because they do even CDs. And I've gotten into this too, where I'll buy a CD that was pressed in Japan versus pressed in Germany versus pressed in the United States. And you can actually plot out the frequency spectrum and see that the master is different. Yep, so those absolutely. CDs were produced in 1984 and each one of them is a little bit different, so am I hearing things because it sounds better or is it just because it was done differently? I don't know.
To kind of repeat what I said about the Sony being made in the first place, if it's pushing the industry to make better recordings and remaster it to make it sound better, I don't care. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Just really quick on that same note, I downloaded Michael Jackson's Thriller album in DSD format, and I also got the CD version, and I started playing it, and I'm like, wait a minute, wait, something's off here. The shaker is coming out the opposite side. The shaker that comes in the beginning. So it's panned completely to the opposite side in the DSD version that I have.
That's interesting.
One thing I noticed this weekend, everybody had some input to the CD that was used for the Aggieland money round, and I picked 2 tracks. And one of the tracks, they put on a different version of it, so I wasn't too familiar with it. The other one thought I was being all proactive and downloaded an entire album for one of the tracks off of hdtracks.com. And did all that. I didn't really pay attention to it. I was just like, well, it's got to be better since then they put it on the disc. It gets to one point where it's really dynamic and everything just collapsed. I mean, it was like they had a compressor on when this drums hits. So I ended up putting my regular low-res version of the same song that came off of the CD onto my USB drive and then comparing that to the one I got off of HD Tracks. And it had all the dynamics that I remembered. Just a word of caution, when you do download some HD music, you might want to double check because they could have gone the other direction in mastering as well, as they obviously did in this case.
Yeah, I've run into that too. I mean, kind of on that same note, and I'll try to be brief, but the Rage Against the Machine self-titled album, if you guys ever been to a dynamic range database before?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So if you go look, I think it was the 20th anniversary edition came out, and it was super high compressed. I mean, I think it had like dynamic ranges of, I want to say like 7s, 6s, stuff like that, as compared to like the original album where it's probably like 11s or 12s. I'm pulling this off the air. But the point being that if you go to HD Track and you look at what they have the the album as well in HD. But when you go to Dynamic Range Database and look, somebody has ripped that and looked and gone through, taking the time to do that for us. And when you compare, the HD track version is the 20th anniversary super compressed version. So it, like you're saying, it's one of those things where you buyer beware, you know. And I posted about this. There's a few forums out there. If you just go look when you get ready to buy an album or something, and just go Google it or go on Dynamic Range Database, and do just maybe 5 minutes worth of research, you can probably save yourself $20 from buying a highly compressed, high-res version versus just going out and buying the original CD from 1986 or 1993 or whatever off eBay for $5. So
right. No, absolutely.
It's also interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's no clear-cut answer. That's for sure.
It's interesting stuff going on in the music industry. It seems it kind of makes you wonder sometimes they just do it just to make more money, as opposed to putting out a better product. Yeah, well, obviously they're wanting to make money, but instead of putting out a better product and charging you for it, they're just putting out a crappy product and then charging you for it. So
right.
So it seems.
Wow.
And that's kind of where it comes back to. If you want to enjoy the music, just enjoy the music. It's going back to what you guys are, using your music app, or if you're using Spotify or you're using Tidal or whatever, whatever makes you feel good, to let it go out of the way. At a certain point, you gotta let go and just enjoy what you got. But
I agree. You definitely can't over worry about these kind of things and just forget to enjoy the music, like you say.
I think all three of us have given a lot of demos, and when it comes to one piece of the pie, I've never, unless you were to play back something that was a 64 K MP3 file or something that's obviously has compression issues, but I've never had somebody go, oh, this isn't the high res version. Oh, that is high res. Oh, you're using these kinds of amps. Oh, I think, speaker placement and type and overall power and tuning decisions all are definitely audible. But those kinds of decisions have points of limited returns. Yeah,
no, I agree. I think it's funny that you say that, because I've been in that same situation where somebody has demoed my car and they thought what I had was something I had before, and then I told them, that I don't have that anymore, and they're like, oh wow, and it kind of negated their whole talking point and the critiquing of what I have. So the power of influence, I suppose, or whatever. But yeah, those are always interesting conversations. Like, yeah, I don't have that anymore, man. Sorry. And, oh, never mind. Then like, all right, cool. Well, thanks, for demoing. Give me some feedback anyway.
That's one of the fun parts about the forums. You can go on there and talk about all these things that you did and then be like, nah, I didn't really do any of that. No, sorry.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm going to start going build bug. Yeah, just starting build logs, like fake build logs, just to throw people off. Then we'll give a stock stereo and, oh my God, it sounds incredible. Yeah, thanks, man. Ford really appreciates that.
So going back to the GS9, we talked about the interface, we talked about the buttons on it, we talked about the app experience. Do you have any technical babble that you want to share with us?
Well,
beyond that?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of go back to the app, because we've segued a little bit, and I'm going to read some from my notes and maybe make it a little bit easier for me to go through. So the issues that I had were the app, and I think we've discussed that. I think, Klif, you said it froze on you a lot with the new update. I don't know if it still does that. I haven't used the app in months, man. I've just been using the phone just straight up as is, and then using my steering wheel buttons to control, fast forward, or not fast forward, but track forward and volume and stuff like that. So, but with the new updates, I'm hoping that those things are resolved. The one thing, I think you guys have mentioned that you've run into this, and I know other people have run into this, when you plug a USB drive into the GS9, sometimes I've gotten the first track will repeat so many times it makes you just want to take the USB drive and throw it out the window. And I can't figure out. Yeah, and there's no rhyme or reason. I've had it happen with FLAC files. I've had it happen with Apple lossless MP3. I haven't tried with WAV, but I don't think that's going to matter. I've had it do it, second album in, 14th album in. There doesn't really seem to be rhyme or reason. So that's a very frustrating thing, and I don't know how to fix it.
So the firmware on the unit itself, are you running the latest firmware?
Yeah, I am. And I have been when I've run into these issues as well.
Okay. Okay. I was just checking that.
Another thing that I was going to the North Carolina sound quality meet my friend Jason Bartholomew put on. He puts that on every April, and I think he puts one on in the fall around October or so. So shout out to Jason for doing that for us. But I was heading up that way in April, and it was a couple months ago, and I had been using one of my USB drives. So the Sony, I guess one thing we didn't mention was the Sony has, 3 2 USB, like standard USB ports, and then a third USB port, but it's a micro USB port. Is that correct, guys? Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And then it has Bluetooth and it has radio and auxiliary inputs and stuff. So I had a thumb drive in USB 2. I had my phone connected to USB 1, and then I had Bluetooth turned on. So I through the trip, I had toggled around and gotten to Bluetooth. And then after I made a call, I went back to go to USB 1, and it wasn't reading it. It just, I couldn't, like it said, it couldn't read, or it threw up an error of some sort. I don't remember what it was. Long story short, it wouldn't read any of the drives. So I had to hold the source button down, power cycle the unit, and then it worked. That happened to me twice on an 8-hour drive. And I've never had it happen since. It's really weird. And the first time it happened was about 45 minutes into the drive. I drive at least 45 minutes every day to work. So it's just odd. Yeah.
I know a competitor at an event earlier this spring had that unit, and he received a phone call or something during judging, and it messed up not only, that judging track or whatever, but after they got that sorted out, he went back to play the music. There was an issue, and he had to reset the thing. Maybe the same issue that happened too. Yeah, something odd happened there.
Yeah, it's weird. And the only reason I mention it is because, these are just things that I've run into since I've owned it. I kind of discussed the sound quality, that I think it's a great sounding, quote unquote, head unit. Clipping, a lot of things, when you go to set gains, people always will take a scope, or they should take a scope. I shouldn't say should. Ideally, you take a scope and you find out what the maximum non-distorted or non-clipped output is. On the Sony, I did that, and the Sony volume, I've got in my notes here that it goes up to 50. So I got to 49 out of 50, and then when I rolled from 49 to 50, I got distortion in the waveform. So it went from a sine wave to it wasn't quite square, but it was close enough to it to consider it distorted. The voltage that I measured coming out around that point was about 4.2 volts RMS. So to me, that's about what it puts out. I think it's supposed to be spec'd at 4 volts output, or maybe 5 volts. But I measured about 4.2. So to me, that's kind of par for the course.
Right.
And then another thing was the volume. You guys, Klif, I don't know if you've owned the P99, but I know, Ben, that you have. Have you noticed that when you get up to, so have you guys noticed that when you get up to about, I think the volume goes up to 62, you get up to maybe about 54 or something, and then
53 goes from going to
distortion.
Yeah, right. So I was curious, okay, can I plot that out? So I measured the voltage output, played a 1K hertz tone, measured the voltage output from 0 to 62, and I plotted it out, and I said, okay, let's see how the Sony compares. So I did the same thing. The thing I found was, I think the Sony, I might have to read through my notes here and see if I got it written down. On the Pioneer, when it went from, I'd say maybe like the last 10%, it jumps up. P99 output voltage increases nearly 66% in the last 10% of volume turns. So that's about the range I wrote down, 56 to 62, which is very surprising. So that means it's not, at least when you plot it out, it's not quite a logarithmic scale. And the logarithmic scale is supposed to be kind of like the audio type volume taper that, you try to adhere to as best you can. When I plotted the Sony, it seemed to have a much better scale in that regard. It was a lot smoother of a trend line. There was no sudden increase in voltage output or anything like that toward the end. At least in that regard, I really like that as well. So that's just more food for thought.
That's really good to know.
Speaking of that volume knob, it's got to be the sexiest feeling volume knob on the planet, as far as I'm concerned.
Dude, there are things that I want to say, but I can't say it in a podcast.
Yeah, I really like that. The feel of that volume knob, the response of it, and then watching the digital volume change as you turn it. It's just, I love it.
Have y'all noticed when it's colder, when you get in your car, that it's a little bit harder to turn? Maybe it takes a little bit to warm up, or is that just mine?
Mine's not currently installed in the car, so I can't help you there.
Okay.
I never drive my car.
Listen to us. We're a bunch of...
So I've been told. You guys.
I only pull my car around in a trailer, and so it's usually warmed up by the time I get around to turning it on.
If you get a charge in the battery.
Yeah. I mean, you get details.
You don't need a charge on the battery when you got a power supply, right?
Well, long story.
Oh.
Did you see Klif? Oh, yeah.
What about 1.21 gigawatts?
Yeah, that's about what I needed at finals.
Oh, man, that stinks. I wasn't there last year, so apparently I missed that fun. Oh, man.
All right. You got anything else written down on your little notebook of power?
Yeah, right. My notebook of power. No, I mean, those are the highlights.
Interestingly, looking at Sony's website, I cannot find anywhere where they say anything about how many volts come out of it.
Oh, does it? No, okay.
Really? Huh.
I can't remember. I want to say it was supposed to be 4-volt or something, but I really don't remember what it was advertised as. And it may be 5-volt. It seems like their double DINs that I was looking at one point was 5. So I'm just going to guess that, they typically do the same thing. That if one is 4, then the rest are 4 or whatever. So
I guess that's like Rolls-Royce. It's just adequate.
But yeah, so I think from my perspective, the big thing is it sounds great. I don't do DSD. I don't do high res because honestly, man, that stuff's expensive and I don't have enough money to spend $20 on every album. I wish they would sell tracks by themselves, but that's a different conversation for another day.
Yep.
And the few times that I have done, try to do A/B testing, I don't know if I'm using the same source, the same master. I just don't know. So I can't say for sure. So I hesitate to say, yeah, DSD sounds better or, it doesn't sound better or whatever. My guess is that once you get above a high MP3 rate, I'm probably not going to be able to tell the difference anyway because, whatever.
Right.
I'd like you to try something.
Okay.
Take a non-DSD high-res file or even a WAV file and then run it through the Sony and upconvert it to DSD and see if you hear a difference.
Is that
I know we're talking voodoo, but...
No, yeah, I don't... I think that's worth.
Just try it and see what you hear, if anything, and I'll report back. I'm curious.
Okay. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that too. So it has the DSXX feature, which is to me, it's kind of like their version of Alpine's media expander, and then it seems like everybody's got something like that.
And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking. Okay. You can upconvert via the Sony, or I'm sorry, the Onkyo.
Yeah, with the Onkyo.
You can upconvert your output from PCM to DSD. So everything going out is upconverted to DSD. And it's the Onkyo app doing it, not the Sony. But you're then sending it to the Sony as a DSD source. So just try that. And I'm curious if you hear any differences. Yeah,
no, I'll try that. But yeah, I guess I should mention, when I did my sound testing or whatever between the P99 and the Sony, I had the DSXX feature disabled. So that was just Sony as bare bones. I turned it on a couple tracks. I didn't really notice a difference. Maybe I just wasn't playing the right songs, or I wasn't using like a low MP3 quality. Maybe it would help then. I don't know. So
right. So since we talked about the inputs and outputs on the thing, let's talk quickly about the digital outputs, or output rather. It's got a Toslink optical output. And I wanted to note for the listeners that you cannot use the higher res formats via the optical output on the Sony. It's limited because of the Toslink. It's an aging technology, and the bandwidth of that specific type of fiber used for Toslink can't support the bandwidth needed for especially DSD. There is a cutoff. I think I'm wanting to say like 92K.
Yeah.
That it'll do via the optical. But if you go above that, you're not getting the full resolution through optical.
I think it's 24-bit 96K, but I think it's something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Again, I'm not sure. I haven't read the spec on or anything like that.
Because we can all hear over 40K.
No, yeah, you totally can. My dogs can't, but I can.
It's like sub bass. You don't hear it, you feel it.
Oh my gosh! All right.
Well, come on.
I feel the distortion.
I feel it in the hairs of my arms. They just tingle.
So basically, what you're telling me is you need a not a bass shaker, a high frequency shaker for your ear.
Yeah, it mounts to the glass. It mounts to the glass and it breaks it. And you hear this.
I'm trademarking hair tingler right now.
Oh my goodness. Hey man, that can go so many ways. You might make a lot of money.
Wow. Hey, I think this would be a good time to talk about your trace rate stuff.
Okay. All right.
You designed or created or some sort of algorithm that you plug in some distances. You take a tape measure from your head position to each driver in the car, and then you plug them into your little website that I use every time I tune a car, like I said, and it'll give you a starting point to plug in for milliseconds delay.
Right.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you created that and what's going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah. So first of all, I have to give props to Robert McIntosh. He's a friend of mine, lives out in Oklahoma, and he is at least to me, he is a guru when it comes to coding things. I can't code worth a flip. So I had mentioned to him the idea about taking an Excel spreadsheet that I had where I had all these, it's basically the website where you type in the distance that you measured from your seated position to each speaker, and then it spits out to you what delays you need to set in your DSP. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. So he did that. He built it up for us, and he made it very simple. The goal was, we didn't want anything complex or anything like that, not snazzy. That way somebody could pull it up from their phone while they're sitting in the car and just punch in the numbers, push the calculate button, and have it spit out what values you need to do. I didn't really do anything special, honestly. I mean, so the calculations, it's just, I found them on the internet, and then basically all you're trying to do, actually, I take that back. I think I got them from an Alpine manual. They used to tell you how they calculate the time delay, or they had something enough in there for me to figure out how they do it. But time delay calculations really isn't that hard. If you just sit on Google for 5 minutes, you'll figure it out. You're like, oh, that's easy. But all I wanted to do was just make something that was quick and easy for people to be able to punch numbers in to an interface, get out what they needed to get out. So that's kind of the history of it. Now, the idea for people who don't understand what time delay is that let's say that you're sitting smack dab in the middle of two speakers and they're each 30 degrees off your azimuth, so each 30 degrees from directly in front of you. And if you were to measure, let's say you measure the left one, it's 36 inches away from you. You measure the right one, it's 36 inches away from you. That should mean, at least, that you're going to have a center image, a center phantom image in between those speakers, so equidistant between those speakers. So time delay on stuff like that doesn't really matter. But when you move to the side, like you are in a car, and you have your left speakers physically closer to you than your right speaker is, the idea is that you would delay in time the signal that comes out of the left speaker, so that way the signal that arrives from the left speaker to your ear arrives at the same time as the right signal speaker does. And then that way you have as close as you possibly can to an in-phase, well-centered between the two loudspeakers image. So I don't know if that helps make things a little bit easier or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, to me, it's a pretty simple concept once you understand it and you do it one or two times. Like, oh, I totally get what time delay means. But when you're new to the hobby, you may not understand it. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. All you're trying to do is just make sure the sound from the two different speakers arrive to you at the same point.
How much do you think impulse response net comes into being a factor in correcting with delay?
So you're asking me a question on the spot. Impulse response in a car is tricky, especially the lower you get in frequency. And the reason why is the lower you get in frequency, the longer the wavelength is. And when you use crossovers, all you're getting is, like, let's say you measure, start off with something more simple. So you measure a tweeter. Tweeter you're going to have a crossover, you're going to have high frequency content. So the impulse response that you were to get will be pretty easy to read and understand. So we're taking this impulse response stuff from the perspective of you kind of have an idea of what impulse response is, because for me to get into the background of that would be something I don't think I could do off the top of my head and not confuse the heck out of people, right? So let's assume that you have a pretty good understanding.
More or less, I'm hoping for those who don't know what it is, they go research now and find out what it is and then come back, because I think it's good for people to start thinking about these things, especially as we go deeper and further on with these podcasts. No,
yeah, that makes total sense. I think for now, I'll just kind of not go into too much detail and just say that impulse response measurements for time delay settings work, but you just kind of have to have an idea of what you're doing to get it to work. I played around with them over the years, and typically every time I do it, mid-range and tweeters are easy to line up, but when it comes to bass frequencies where the wavelength is longer, it's a little bit harder. I've read people's theories on how to properly obtain that, but I don't really mess around with it too much. Typically, honestly, what I do now is I just physically measure it with the distance, punch it into the website, or like some DSPs will have it to where you can type in the distance itself and it will calculate the delay needed for you. And then from there, I kind of go by ear, which I think would be maybe a longer conversation, because there's different ways. I mean, you can do this by measurement, or you can do it by ear with pink noise, or you can do it with impulse clicks. So it's a can of worms, man.
My voice is in phase.
Yeah, right.
My voice is in phase.
And then the thing is, you're not always going to be in phase at, the whole band of frequency you want. Right. Yeah, then you've got crossover phase things that you're introducing. So, I think the easiest thing to do, at least for a beginner, is just to go to this website. It's traceright.com /calc. And you guys are going to have a link, so it'll make it a little bit easier. But you go to the website, you punch in the distance that you measure with a tape measure, and then, you just go from there. And then if you're really new, you take that information, you go to a show, you find somebody that's willing to let you demo their car and willing to provide you 5 or 10 minutes of their time to maybe explain some of this stuff in person. I think that's the biggest help. go into either a competition or a get together that somebody's hosting and getting hands on with somebody that has some knowledge on the subject, rather than you can read about this stuff all day long, but 10 minutes with somebody who knows what they're doing will go a lot further than 24 hours reading on the internet, in my opinion. So,
especially when you can actually play with it and use it and hear what it's doing. As soon as you hear that relationship correspond with the numbers that you're changing on the screen, to me, that's when it all comes together.
Yeah, I totally agree.
In relation to that, let's talk about rear fill quickly.
You know, just a real quick conversation, because rear fill is completely uncontroversial, and we should be able to get through that with no problem. Everybody will agree, and we'll be golden.
No, there's proper rear fill, and then there's everything else.
I've heard the proper rear fill before.
Well, so yeah, that's the thing. Is proper really proper? So, because like, you know, you take like something like the JBL uses the Logic 7. The JBL MS8 uses Logic 7. That uses what I can only think to call is just active processing. So it sees the input signal, it knows, you know, what phase it's in or whatever, and then it routes it accordingly. So that's, you know, an active process. Then there's what we do, which I would consider more passive, where we say, all right, all the signal coming from this channel is going to be manipulated in this way, and I'm sending it here. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, and then there's just straight up rear fill where you got stereo speakers behind you. So there's all sorts of ones.
I hear the quote unquote proper rear fill as being referred to as differential rear fill. So maybe quickly explain what does that mean?
Okay. So proper rear fill, as you're calling it, and like you said, it's differential rear fill. So for the left rear speaker, you would take the signal of both left and right incoming, and you would take left minus right. And ideally what that's going to leave you with is the left signal only. And then for the right signal, you do the opposite of that. You take the right signal minus the left signal, and that's supposed to leave you with the right signal. And this is just how you use it in practice. The theory and all that stuff, you have to read some things about it, because I'm not going to try to explain it. I knew it 3 years ago or 5 years ago when I was trying to study it and understand it. Then I figured it out and forgot it. It's like college, right? So at least for me, I have a horrible memory, man. This is horrible. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's how you use it. So, for example,
and you delay the crap out of it.
The effect that you're supposed to get is a larger venue, if you want to call it that. So the rear fill, what it typically will do is add a sense of ambience or ambiance, however the proper way to pronounce that word is. And to do that, you do the differential mixing, L minus R, R minus L, and then you would delay the speaker some, a bit of time anywhere. I've seen people say they do it 5 milliseconds in addition to what they have, to their front stage. Anywhere, I talked to a guy who does 40. And to me, it really depends on the car and the aiming and the effect that you're trying to get to, because at least in my opinion, this isn't something that's going to be right or wrong, no matter how you set it up, at least in the context of time and levels. I think a lot of that is going to depend on what you want and maybe even the type of music that you listen to try to get the effect that you're going after. So personally, I have about 20 milliseconds delay on my rear speakers. The bandwidth that they play, they're 2.5 inch, they're Audio Frog GB25s, and the bandwidth that they play is about, I think it's 400 hertz to about 3K hertz, give or take. And so they're band limited. And then I've just level matched them to kind of make sense for that delays. And what I mean by that is, if you just add 20 milliseconds delay to your speakers, you're delaying it in time, but you're not delaying it in level, right? And so you want to get time and level. So if you delay them like I did, 20 milliseconds, then I got to say, okay, then how much level?
If I go 20 feet back, how quieter is it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If you're standing in front of a speaker and you move 20 feet away, you got to match that. And if you just delay it, then you're not going to get the same effect. You've got to level match or level attenuate and delay. So you've got to try to make them sound the same. And you can use, if you go online, I'm sure there's calculators for this and kind of stuff like that. There's the standard notion that every, doubling of distance is 6 dB drop. Yeah, to me, the most important thing isn't how much you delay it, but making sure that your delay and your attenuation match together. And I think if you make sure you're doing those right, then, then from there you play until you get the desired effect. And I don't want to talk too much. I know I'm getting long-winded here, but another thing that I was speaking with a friend of mine about, actually earlier today, I talked to him on the way home. Well, he was asking me about the rear fill, or I actually brought it up to him, asking if somebody at College Station was running it. And I was telling him that in some cases, rear fill can hurt you, and in some cases it can help you, and it kind of depends on the recording. And I say that because there are some recordings where there's panned information far left or far right, and when it pans out for the rear fill, what that will do is that will actually put it in the center behind you. And when that happens, if the level is too high behind you, then obviously it'll draw your attention behind you. So you've got to make sure that your level is appropriate to where it doesn't draw attention to the speakers behind you, but more kind of reinforces the soundstage in front of you. And that may be a hard concept to grasp for people who are just trying it, but I urge you just to play around with this stuff a little bit and play different music. That's the one thing. Don't play just maybe one genre of music, but play varying genres, because they're all recorded and mastered and mixed and things like that differently. So you're going to have different effects for different songs, different music, different genres. Not me.
Any rumors, any internet topics that you want to take on real quick?
I'm like Lisa from Saved by the Bell, man. I got all the scoops.
All right, we'll save your favorite Dash Tumors and Crosstalk for the next time we meet.
Well, I don't know. I think Dash Tumors kind of come in with proper rear fill, because I think some people are doing that in the right car. If placed correctly, you end up getting that crosstalk right speaker into the left side of the car coming out the side window, which will help increase your width. So I think that's where some of the theory has come from on that. And then some have thought doing similar with that with rear fill, running front right channel to left rear channel, and same on the other side, to try to help increase the perceived width in the vehicle. My problem with using rear fill to create ambience is that our brains know how big the space is that we're in. And I'm going to throw another topic in here at the same time. That's where the JBL curve came from. That's where we
could throw psychoacoustics into that also.
You could tell people they're running rear fill and the stage just got bigger.
Right.
Or if tell Klif, he's like, your stage just collapsed.
Well, okay, so we need to define a couple things real quick. Crosstalk, what is it?
I'm sure there's probably a much better explanation, a more accurate definition, but it would be off the top of my head. I was trying to think of how to explain this. So I think the example that I gave to you guys when we were kind of chit-chatting about some stuff is if you got, so standard, I'll call it standard stereo triangle, is about 30 degrees. So each speaker is 30 degrees, off dead ahead from you. And when you're playing like that, if you're sitting dead center of those speakers, if you measure the signal from each speaker at each ear, so that will be a total of 4 measurements, right? So you have your left speaker playing and a left ear, right ear measurement, and then you do the same thing, right speaker, left ear, right ear measurement. All 4 of those should match theoretically, right? At least, off the top. But the problem is when you move off center, then you get the head shadowing effect. I guess you get it even less. So that changes what each ear hears. So I don't know if that
So
helps.
basically your left ear is hearing more of the right side than it should, and vice versa.
I'm trying to think. So if I'm sitting in the car and I'm in my passenger seat, and typically when that happens is you're going to have your left speaker, let's say it's like 10 degrees off dead in front of you. I'm not talking about the aiming of the speaker. I'm just talking about if you're looking dead ahead
Physical,
of you.
right. Yeah.
Right. If you go 10 degrees to the left, that's usually where, speakers are on the left, on the driver's side of the car. I mean, it can range anywhere from 5 to 20, but typically let's just say 10 degrees. But on the right side, at least in my car, I would say it's probably maybe closer to 35 or 40 or something like that. So the disparity between those angles is going to cause a different response measured at each of my ears for each speaker. So because my left speaker is more in front of me, my left ear and my right ear, they almost hear that left speaker the same. But because my right speaker is so far off the azimuth, my right ear is going to hear more of that right speaker than my left ear. Now, that's negating all reflection, things like that, which are a total another bag of problems. But that's kind of the general idea of it. So, and if you can mitigate that, at least in my opinion, as far as I understand it, you could also improve the stereo triangle. So there are things that I've thought about trying to do, and there are actually OEMs that are doing different things with that, like putting speakers in the headrest, hint, hint. But in my personal experience, I've tried to do things like this with L-R, at my headrest with little speakers in my ears, trying to counteract the response differences. it just doesn't work that well. So.
And then we mentioned dash tumors. What's that? You're going to offend like the 2/3 of the people listening, just so you know.
That was me. I was there too, so I call them that in a loving manner.
Between GS9s and dash tumors, we've now offended 100% of everybody that was at Aggieland.
I'm gonna go to the next show and I'm gonna get blackballed, man. They're gonna be like, "Oh, you can't listen to my car. You're just gonna say it sounds like crap because I got dash tumors." Okay, I had dash tumors. All right, I was there.
I have proper rear fill, Aaron. I think you should love it.
It sounds incredible. Did you delay it 20 milliseconds?
It's got proper rear fill with the JBL curve, and that's the other one that we have to define real quick. What the heck is a JBL curve?
You're going to find that because you brought that bad boy up.
Klif did.
Oh,
it's all
you brought
Klif.
it up. Okay.
And so I think the JBL curve was something that they put together based on a bunch of people that went into a room. They had varying placements of speakers and positions and room sizes and whatever, and they went through and said this is what sounds good, and we ended up with something that is plus 6 dB or so at 20 hertz down to flat around 200 hertz. Then it's flat up to around 2.5K and then slopes off from there to 20K, which obviously varies in a lot of realms, but this was kind of what they came up with that sounded good in a car. And my understanding for the boost at the bottom end in the sub bass is because we perceive bass differently in a small space versus a large space. If you were to take that into like a gymnasium, for example, and you were to put that same curve on it, it would sound pretty horrible. And all we'd hear is a sub bass because of the size of the room and how we're perceiving that. And I'm sure I butchered some of that, but is that close?
Yeah, that's
as far as I understand, that's pretty correct. And I think too that whole thing came about when they were. I may be wrong, but it seems to me that came around the same time they were doing the MS8. And so I'm guessing, and I think maybe this is right, that curve was part of the development for the MS8. So when the MS8 did its auto tuning, it was targeting that curve. And I think another thing too, I think, again, I'm throwing out think a lot, but I'm pretty sure this is right, is that curve was with the binaural mics on. I would have to go back and double check that. And if it is, then that really changes things. That changes things a whole lot. And that kind of gets into an aspect of, why I personally don't tune to a particular curve. I'm not saying that curves aren't useful, but I don't target one per se.
Did you say binaural?
Binaural. Man, dude, I've heard it both ways. I'm from Alabama, so I get a pass, right?
Well, I heard you say Dima also, and I think people around here call it Dima.
Dima, yeah. You would.
I like binaural. I'm going to use that from now on.
That's what I heard, and I was like, wait a minute, what's he? Oh, binaural. But he didn't mean me, naural.
I think he did.
No, man, so I think the first time I heard it that way was on
A-L, how do you spell it? A-U-R-A-L. Yes.
Yeah.
Anywho,
I think they should get some smart people to do this podcast.
No, they definitely. No, maybe not smart people, but just people who know how to pronounce words. There's a difference. I work with people who pronounce words. I don't think they're that smart. Well, not work with now, but anyway.
See, now we've gone from nitpicking our music to nitpicking the damn podcast. But with that, I think I'm going to end us.
We're just trying to get ahead of everybody else.
Oh my God, that's right.
Well, thanks for being on, Aaron. We'll have to have you back in. Try to remember to stop nitpicking so much your system and enjoy that music.
That's tough to do, dude. But I appreciate it, guys. For real, it's been fun, and I would like to maybe do this again sometime if y'all don't get too many complaints and say, "Oh man, never invite that turd back."
I don't look at any of the feedback, so
what feedback?
You send all the feedback.
That's something we do need to remind people to do.
I delete everything that you send me, so.
Right. So if you have listened to this podcast thus far, please take a moment to go to your app player, be it the App Store or SoundCloud or wherever, and like us, rate us, and leave a review if it gives you the option. That helps not only the people that we target find us, but also the people who might not be in our target audience find info on SQology Podcast.
If you have something bad to say, email Ben.
That's binaural.
At SQology.com. I'm sorry,
binaural at SQology.com.
All right. We'll talk to you later, guys.
All right. See ya.
Have a good one.
Bye.